Are you searching for the best digital asset management tools for your performance advertising team? If yes, you've already probably come up with a list of at least a dozen damn platforms that, to be fair, are great for brand enforcement and sharing assets to partners. However, most of those platforms weren't built with performance advertisers in mind, especially the ones who ship hundreds of different creatives across Meta, TikTok, YouTube, and other ad platforms every single month. In this video, I want to give you a version of that question that's actually useful. So, what is a damn platform built with performance creative teams in mind, and what are the requirements and the benefits of using that kind of a system? What does the current tool landscape look like, and where does the gap still sit? I'm going to cover 5 criteria that separate a performance stamp from everything else. If you're a creative strategist, a UA creative manager, or a performance marketing lead, and you feel like your creative process is held together by Google Drive and a bunch of different scattered Slack threads, then this video is for you. Let's get into it. So first of all, what are the 5 things that matter to a performance team? Obviously, what you care about at the end of the day is being able to produce high volumes of ad creative, learn what went live, what performed and what didn't, and then use that information to guide future design sprints. So ad performance improves, you sell more and convert better. So here are the 5 things that separate a damn built for performance advertising from everything else. Criteria 1, AI-powered tagging at production volume. Now, performance creative teams don't produce 20 creative assets a quarter. They produce 100 to 500 or even more creatives every single week across formats, across agencies, and across channels. And at that volume, manual tagging is a full-time job. The question you need to ask any damn provider is, does AI tagging come standard, or is it locked behind an enterprise tier of some kind? Are you able to define the taxonomy yourself, or are you stuck with what the service provider or the platform provides you with? Because every creative team has specific needs that strict standardization tends to get in the way of. Criteria 2 is automated naming convention enforcement and platform uploads. Naming conventions, I don't need to tell you about it. You know it's the connective tissue of your performance reporting. Without it, your analytics tends to break. You can't filter by concept, by format, by different creative agencies, and your reporting is next to useless. The problem is naming conventions slip very easily. Agencies and creators might name things very differently, and in a high volume team, manual naming is full of errors, things slip and get missed, and errors start to accumulate. The performance dam applies naming conventions automatically on export, based on rules used at once, enforced every time on every file and for every channel. So you can stop relying on person downloading the file to get it right. It's also important to note that the naming needs to be customized by platform, because you need to be able to tell different ad platforms apart for the best performance. So you need to be able to upload things directly into different platforms, correctly named, because otherwise it'll just take hours and hours to get hundreds of ad assets ready every single month. Performance Dam pushes assets directly to the library of the ad platform, and from there your media buying can take it over. Criteria 3 is performance data directly connected to the asset, because most teams use a separate creative analytics tool, and those tools are genuinely useful. But when performance data lives in a separate platform from your asset library, and when the connection between the two depends on a naming convention that may or may not have been followed, you have a problem. My designer made 100 static ads last sprint, and I don't even know if they went live. That's a direct quote from a prospect. It's a huge visibility problem. A performance dam connects performance data directly to the asset. So your creative strategist and your designer see the same information in the same place without a manual reporting step in between. Criteria 4, multi-agency workflows in a single platform. Managing one agency is straightforward enough. 3 is still manageable, although a lot of work. But if you're talking about 5 different creative agencies or more, each working in their own tools, submitting assets through their own processes, requiring their own briefing flows, maybe using their own naming conventions, the overhead compounds very quickly and can easily end up being someone's full-time job, which can then in turn kill your margins. So when looking for a digital asset management platform, make sure every agency can work through the same place, see only their scope without requiring you to translate 5 different working styles or flows, storage locations, and so on to different places. So ask yourself, can briefs go out centrally? Can feedback happen on the asset, not in a separate Slack thread somewhere? And can you see what all of the different agencies are producing in a single view on your end? And then lastly, the 5th criteria, fast brief to launch cycles with as little tool switching as possible. The full creative workflow typically goes from brief to production to review, feedback, revision, and approvals, to then naming, uploading to ad platforms, and setting ads live. For most teams, this process lives scattered across a bunch of tools. You might brief in Notion or a Google Doc. Production is tracked in Asana, ClickUp, Monday, a spreadsheet, or some kind of other general project management tool. Reviews and feedback are done in Frame.io or Slack, and files are kept in Drive or Dropbox. Naming is typically fixed manually, maybe using a spreadsheet convention of some kind, and then the uploads themselves are done manually to each separate ad platform. With a tool stack this scattered, every handoff between tools is a place where things can slow down, get lost, or break. The faster you're moving, and performance teams certainly move fast, the more painful it is. None of these requirements are in a legacy DAM's DNA. They just weren't built for that use case in mind. So then let's look at the software landscape against those 5 criteria. First, we have the traditional DAM providers, software like Binder, Canto, or Frontify. These are serious tools and they're built for a real problem. The problem is brand governance at large enterprises, keeping logo files accessible, maintaining version histories, managing brand assets across 50 markets, and making sure your intellectual property is protected. And they're generally good at this. They have high governance, controlled distribution, and a compliance focus. They have a lot of settings for this as well, but against performance criteria, here's where they land. AI tagging is usually very limited and it's not really built for high velocity creative batches. They don't really have direct channel integrations to ad platforms, so Meta, TikTok, or YouTube integrations just aren't there because this is very far from the original design. Naming convention enforcement is mostly manual, although there might be some AI assisted flows that can help here to an extent, but it's not really built for ad naming taxonomies in mind. Performance data isn't connected to the assets either. These tools were built for distributing brand assets, not to measure ad performance. There might be some performance data in there, but it's mostly the number of times a file has been viewed, did a specific person look at it, and so on. Multi-agency workflows for performance sprints aren't really there. These platforms do have sophisticated access controls, but the sort of brief to submission workflow a performance team needs isn't there. Asset submissions and reviews can be done to an extent on these platforms, but there are quite severe limitations. For example, there's typically no way to review a video frame by frame and mark where changes are needed. So to sum it up, traditional DAMs are great for what they were built for, but not for performance creative teams. Then we have the general creative ops platforms. Some providers recognized the gap the traditional players had and moved in this creative ops direction. They've added workflow features. There's some performance analytic modules layered in, and some channel integrations might be there as well. It's closer to the right answer, and you have platforms like Frame.io or Air that can fall into this category, for example. But here's where the gap typically still remains. AI tagging is often locked behind very expensive enterprise pricing, and the teams that would benefit from this the most, so the high volume performance teams, are frequently priced out. The AI tagging can also have severe limitations on how you can build the taxonomy. Channel uploads are there on some of these platforms, but it might be a third-party connector, or there might be limitations to how you can push the assets with the right names, for example. Performance data is there to some extent, but for most of these platforms, it's a modular integration that doesn't really connect directly to the asset in your library. It's based on the naming conventions, similar to how it works for the creative analytics platforms. There is workflow logic here. It's built around agency production and brand team workflows, but not for performance advertising sprints. Briefing, reviews, approvals map to a different cadence on these platforms. But they are good and they close part of the gap, but they just don't close all of it. Then we have insights only or creative analytics tools, platforms that show you which of your ad creatives are performing, and these are genuinely valuable. A lot of performance teams already use them, and for good reason, because these offer a lot of very deep insights. But they're not a digital asset management platform. They don't hold your assets, they don't manage your workflow, and they don't connect to the file the designer produced. They just connect to the naming convention used when the ad was uploaded. So if that naming convention was inconsistent, the analytics are also incomplete. These platforms solve the reporting problem. They don't solve the asset management, workflow, or channel integration problems. It's also good to make a practical note here that many of these insight tools were built with the performance marketer in mind, so they aren't so well suited for the creative production team who might need a different set of insights. And finally, there are the modern performance DAM platforms that bring it all together in one place. But what does a performance DAM actually look like in practice? When it comes to AI tagging, when a batch of creative comes in from an agency or your in-house designer, everything is automatically tagged by AI. Not by file names, but what's actually in the asset. The metadata, the visual content, the format, the hook type, what products are shown, the copy on screen in the case of videos, and so on. This means your library stays searchable at any scale. If you're looking for the UGC video from last quarter that featured a product demo and ended with a testimonial, you just type what you're looking for. You don't need to open a folder or scroll through a list of file names. You just describe what you're looking for and it's there. For asset naming conventions, you simply set your naming rules once. Campaign naming structure, format codes, channel designations, whatever it requires, you set it and the platform applies it automatically. When it comes to performance data being connected to the asset, once a batch of assets goes live, performance data comes back into the library. So the impressions, the spend, the ROAS, the conversions, It's right there, visible next to the asset for every single asset. Your designer can see which of the 40 statics they produced last sprint actually ran, which one the media buyer chose to scale. All of that information feeds into the next brief. Not via Slack message or manual report, it's right there next to the asset. When it comes to multi-agency workflows, each agency works through their own view. They see their briefs, their submissions, and their specific feedback. They don't see other agencies' work, and they don't need to learn the full platform either. You, on the other hand, see everything. All the agencies, the projects, the stages, everything in a single view. You see which briefs have gone out, which assets have come back, what requires reviews, what's ready to use, and so on. So now your creative strategist has one source of truth, not a stack of different platforms. But what's the ultimate payoff of having a platform like this? The biggest gain you'll see is a massive improvement in creative velocity. Companies like the Longevity Store or the creative agency Be Human have been able to double to quadruple their creative concept volume without any extra headcount when they move to a single platform from these scattered sets of tools. Supercell, who's one of the world's largest gaming companies by revenue, was also able to reduce time spent on asset management by a whopping 50%. Once your team is able to connect performance data to the asset library and tag everything automatically, you're able to close the loop between what was produced and what performed in a much more complete way. And that can then feed into your next sprints, improving the overall results of your advertising. And after a few months, you have a library of creatives that are proven to work, and you can simply feed those insights into every single new design iteration. If you're running a performance creative team and want to see this in practice with your own library, the link's in the description.